Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I'm Mark State. And as always, our most grateful thanks to everyone who helps keep this show on the road. And that's our Bestseller Academics in the Academy and our patrons over on Patreon. If you want to support the podcast and get tons of extra content, pop over to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. There you will find ways you can support the podcast. You get all this extra stuff like over 120 deep dives. Go for the chart topper option on Patreon. If you want to find out about the Academy and get me and Mr. D as your tutors and discover an amazing community. And we've got, and finally, after this, we're interviewing one of our Academy All-Stars for a special episode, so you can check that out as well. Go to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. Mr. D, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm absolutely freaking out over inflation, though, Mark.
Really?
Inflation, yeah. Inflation figures came out today. Now, I know how much books have been affected by, but in the UK, apparently, food's been up 18%, but what they haven't reported in the national statistics, what they have excluded, is the costs of podcasting.
Through the roof, mate.
The costs of podcasting, folks, have gone up 100% for us in the last 12 months. 100%. So I just want to add to your request there for people who are looking to support us. Please join and support us, because that would absolutely help us hugely. It's and we want to support. We actually want to support as well the people that help us put this podcast together. So it's sharing the love with everyone. So, but it's good, Mark. We got spring in the air. But I've got to say, and I don't want to even mention these two letters because we will fall down a rabbit hole without even starting this podcast. But I have been playing with AI this week. We're going to talk about it a little bit in this week's interview. I know it's a hot topic. It's a huge hot topic, and it's going to be for a long time. But my mind is officially blown. I honestly don't even know where to start. And I mean, I've experienced a lot of things in my life. The advent of the internet. I remember the day I discovered the internet. It was when I found a Metallica guitar tab on a Usenet group, like when it was just all text, right? There wasn't even a thing called a web browser when I discovered the internet. And that blew my mind. I thought, oh, is there more of this stuff? But AI is just, my technological brain is not capable of taking in what's going on right now. So anyway, folks, if you're interested in this, we've got some interesting things to discuss today in the interview. But before we dive in, Mark, you've got a not a virtual. It's a virtual.
No, real life in the flesh.
Real life in the flesh. We want more real life. Yes.
There's going to be all sorts of opportunities over the summer to see my pale face in the real world and throw rotten fruit at me or whatever. But the first one is coming up on Thursday, 30th of March. I'm going to be at the Blackwell's Bookshop in Manchester with friend of the podcast, Queeve McDonnell. He's going to be interviewing me. He said he's going to be holding my feet to the hot irons, so that should be fun. And we're going to be talking about Witches of Woodville books, the film Unwelcome. So yeah, it's going to be really great. So it's Thursday 30th. So if you're listening to this on the Monday, it comes out. It's this Thursday, 6:30 to 8 p.m. Blackwell's Bookshop, 146 Oxford Road, Manchester. I'll put a link in the show notes. Come and see.
I love this because we've talked about beta reading. There's a bit of that in today's interview. We talked about like collaborating with other people. And we often talk about writing books with each other, but I love what I'm seeing happening in our writing communities where we're getting individuals collaborating with each other. And I've noticed like you interview Queeve, he interviews you.
Yes.
And it's great because, ultimately it's so much easier to answer someone's questions than just to go online and speak. So for people out there, this is, I would recommend going to one of these events anyway, just to see the benefits of having a discussion with someone about your books, because really as authors, we don't have discussions about our books. We have discussions with ourselves in our heads. We're always in our heads. We're always thinking in our heads. It's a one-person conversation. Well, it's a monologue in our head, but it's a discussion between you and your voice in your head. That's really what an author kind of goes through. But I think we have to practice finding a partner who will say, I'll interview you, you interview me, or beta read my book, I'll beta read your book. I think that's something that's so undervalued, isn't it? For people that don't have any kind of community, they don't realize that's what you get from being part of something where everyone wants to scratch each other's backs, and it's so lovely.
There won't be any scratching, I promise you that. It'll be two men having a conversation. The whole in conversation thing is it's great. It's sort of come out of the festival circuit, really, I think, where you would get authors doing panels and interviewing and cross interviewing and all that kind of stuff. So it's and it's nice to be interviewed by your peers as well, by people who kind of know what you're going through.
Exactly.
Too.
Yeah.
So,
there's more empathy there. Do you know, the weirdest thing is this is a bit of a strange story, but I once went to a weekend personal development conference, and it was like started at 8 a.m, finished at midnight every day. It was really long days. And what the presenter asked us, it was a guy called Tony Robbins, and everyone was getting fidgety after an hour or two, and he'd get everyone up and he did this thing, and it was very weird, but he got everyone to face a certain direction, the same direction. And then he said, right, put the hands on the person in front of you. Right, now give them a massage, rub their shoulders. And it was this ridiculous state of literally 1,000 people all massaging each other's shoulders. And as strange as it was at first, it was actually really lovely. And the energy in the room was brilliant. And that's what I think of these communities, like everyone massaging each other's shoulders all at the same time.
You probably need written consent now.
You probably do, yes. Amongst adults, I'm sure it's absolutely fine. But no, I think it was a really interesting, it just shifted the whole energy in the room. And I think of this idea of even virtual communities, even when you're not in the same room as someone, for somebody to say to you, yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you're feeling. Oh yeah, I had a really bad writing day today, or tell me about how you're struggling with this, or how you're breaking through that. I tell you what, folks, if you're listening to this podcast today, if part of the reason you listen to this podcast is to kind of feel connected with a writing group, I really, really encourage you to kind of go out there and find that community that works for you as well, because it just, I don't know, it just changes everything for writers. It makes you realize we see it
on the Academy, we see it in the XP group on Facebook.
Exactly. It's like you're not alone. I think that was one of when we interviewed a couple of people before, that was one of the themes. So if you feel alone, really make an effort this week to try and connect with maybe at least one other writer and just chat with them about how their writing's going, and build a bond around that love that you both have. So anyway, enough of that was almost my motivational minute, wasn't it? I did say I was going to do something. It just jumped out. So there was an unofficial one as a warm up for next week. But Mark, let's dive into this week's interview, because there's some really great stuff, isn't there?
This is great. Delighted to speak to Jayne Davis, who's been a long-time listener and supporter of the podcast as well. She writes historical romance set in the late Georgian Regency era. She's self-published with around 38 million Kindle Unlimited page reads, and her latest book is King George's Man, which is a Georgian romance inspired by the highwayman Alfred Noyes. We discuss using a critique site instead of an editor, if it's okay to bend history, and, topical this, her experimentation with artificial intelligence.
Ooh, right, folks. Listen back to this. It's absolutely fantastic interview. So much to unpack afterwards. So join us after the interview for a deep dive. But let's listen to Mark chatting with the lovely Jayne Davis.
Jayne Davis, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
Very good, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. And what I love is, because when I interview authors, I tend to go back and look at old interviews and look at their website. And I'm delighted to see that you've mentioned the Bestseller Experiment quite a few times. So it's especially delightful to have you on the show today. It's have you been listening to us for a wee while then?
Since the episodes in the 10s, I think.
Really?
I was certainly here for the Great Bollocking episode.
Heady days indeed. Funnily enough, I'm seeing Ben Aronovich next week, so I'm going to gird my loins again for that one. What's delightful is this sort of came about by accident, because you signed up to my newsletter and you won a book in a prize draw, and you reminded me who you are. And we have mentioned you on the podcast a few times. I thought, we have got to get you on the podcast again. This is wonderful. And you've got a new book, King George's Man, which is a Georgian romance, which is your genre that you've been incredibly successful in. So tell us about King George's Man, your new book.
It's a short novel, rather than it's about 60,000 words. And it was inspired by the poem The Highwaymen by Alfred Noyes, which is something I was taught in school, as I think many people are. And it came back to me because the Canadian singer Lorena McKennett has set it to music, and I like listening to her.
Right.
So that's pretty good. But But I was never quite happy with the highwayman as a sort of tragic hero, because basically he's a criminal who held up other people at gunpoint. So the highwayman appears in the story, but he's the villain with not that much more than a walk-on part. And there's one or two other episodes that people who know the poem will recognise in it. But the hero and heroine are completely new characters. So it's inspired by, but it isn't that story. I did get the Society of Authors to ask Noise Estate if it was all right to do this. And they said, yes, but please acknowledge us. So there's a bit in the back of the book about that. But it was fun to write.
Yes, I grew up watching, Dick Turpin on Sunday afternoons on the telly.
Yeah.
And he's, the highwayman is very much a romanticized figure, but they were just crooks, basically. Let's not get too romantic about them.
Violent thugs, yes.
Exactly. Yeah. But King George's Band is the latest in your Regency fiction. I mean, you've done incredibly well, and something like, I think you said nearly 38 million Kindle Unlimited page reads, which is just astonishing. You had an incredible year recently, and you've sent me some statistics about the sales and your earnings, and you've got a wonderful series, the Milestone series. When you first started out, was this always the plan, or has this evolved organically? Have you sort of rolled with the punches?
It's evolved. I wanted to be a writer since I was in primary school and inflicted pages and pages and exercise books of dire writing at my teachers. I got interested in the Regency when I was in my teens, because my dad was a teacher who did a couple of tours with service children's schools. So we ended up in Malta when I was in my teens, and we rented a house, a furnished house, and the people had also left some of their books, and there was a whole set of Georgette Heyer novels, who was effectively the author who invented Regency romances. So I got hooked on them then, and a couple of times during my life since then, I tried my hand at writing things, and those have thankfully never seen the light of day. I ended up being a writer of school textbooks purely by chance. And I actually started turning my hand to fiction again because it was something to do when I couldn't sleep at night. I'd sort of lie there and think about the next bit in the plot and write it. And eventually I had a couple of full-length novels and wondered what to do with them. And by this time, Kindle and self-publishing had not quite as big as it is today. So this was about 2017 or 16, so it was going properly. And it was listening to the bestseller experiment that convinced me I actually needed to do some kind of editing to it, not just slap it up there. But rather than pay a development editor, I found a critique site that suited me.
Right.
And so every book since then has been put through that critique site, if you see what I mean, where authors swap critiques. And it's a good place for networking. I end up with 2 or 3 people that read my stuff and I read their stuff. So it's a bit more time consuming than send it to a development editor, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get a manuscript assessment done, which is maybe a couple £100 for 5 or 6 pages of this bit works, this bit doesn't. So you could pay a bit more attention to that. And sometimes it just feels right when it's been through that, and I just send it straight off to copy edit without an assessment.
That's and you've also got a community there as well. This is another thing we find is so important, finding a community of other writers that you can share and swap this stuff with.
Yeah, that community is more sort of about the craft of writing with a bit on the sales. For the sort of sales and marketing, there's your Facebook page and the various pages run by Mark Dawson, because I've taken some of his courses on advertising and implemented a few bits of it, but not enough. Because I've only been doing Amazon ads so far, and they were quite effective to start with. They made a big difference when I only had 1 book out. But the effect of them seems to be tailing off now. So I'm trying to make myself try and get the hang of Facebook ads and things, but I haven't. I thought it would be better to concentrate on the current book and get it out there.
Yeah.
Because publishing more books is also an excellent way of marketing.
Yes, well, that does seem to be. I mean, I was reading the reviews of your books, and so often people are saying, "I love this, and I see there are more, and I'm going to read them all." And that is, and if you've only got 1 or 2 books out, That's okay. Thank you very much. If you've got, as you have, how many books are you up to now?
11, I think.
11, exactly. So, if that's great, because then suddenly which is why you're getting these amazing Kindle Unlimited page reads and sales and backlist sales as well. So do you feel like you're at a point where it's finally starting to gain its own kind of momentum, or because you did a BookBub ad in December, didn't you?
Yeah. Last year it felt like it was gaining momentum because I had several things ready, and I published 5 things last year. One of which was a box set for the series, so that really only involved a little bit of formatting. One was a companion novel, like a parallel story to one of the series, which didn't sell particularly well, but I'm not very disciplined about what I write next. Whatever story's lodged in my head has to be written.
Yeah.
Or I have to make a decision to abandon it, but it just sort of niggles until it's on paper. So, and that was fun to write as well, because fitting the book it was parallel to was a story of as many Regencies are, a young woman who's trying to be forced by her father into a marriage she doesn't want. And the companion story is told from the point of view of her maid. So
right.
There's some of the same events, but the maid has her own sort of below stairs romance and so on. So it was a challenge fitting the 2 stories together, but it was quite a fun challenge.
Fantastic.
So I had sort of basic structure there, and I just had to build on it.
And you're sort of building your own universe with the series, and you have characters coming in from other stories and moving in and out, and they could be background characters in one stories and leads in another. So how are you keeping track of all of those stories in the series and the characters coming and going?
Well, the series is only 4 novels, plus this companion one and a prequel novella. The other half of my output are all standalone novels.
Right.
Or novellas. I quite like novellas because they happen quicker. And sometimes a story can only stand a novella. Like the shortest one is only about 18,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
And the format I printed in wasn't even thick enough to have lettering on the spine. Whereas the first book I published, which was also a standalone, was 165,000.
Right.
Which kind of is the answer to the question of, did you ever consider going the trad route?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that is no, because I've had to cut it in half.
Yeah.
And it would have taken ages, etc. So, yeah, the novels are... Someone says, how do you choose how long it is going to be? And I say, well, the book chooses. It's however long it needs to be.
Right. That's fascinating, because you've got 2 things going on. One is you've got that indie author thing of, I just want to write what I want to write. It's going to be the length that I want it to be. I'm going to put it out when I want to.
Yeah.
Which is terrific. And you've also, you don't necessarily have to deliver a new one in the series. You can write standalones as well. How aware are you now of your readership and what they expect from you? Are they expecting more Marston books, or are they happy with the standalone novels?
They've never actually said what they want next, but I have seen quite a few reviews for the Marston books to say it's a shame it's finished. I have got an idea for book 5, and I've also got an idea for book, what will it be, 2.5.
Right.
In other words, it fits in the middle. The Marston novels are all standalone. You don't have to have read the early ones. It's linked by the main character who becomes the Earl of Marston during it.
Mm.
But I deliberately wrote them as standalones because the one that gets the most traction is quite often the one that's published most recently.
Right. Okay.
And if I've bought a book and it turns out that I can't understand half of it because it's part of a series, or there's far too many extraneous people who just call around just because readers want to see the characters in the previous book and they don't really have anything to do with the plot, that's just switches me off.
Right.
So although you probably enjoy it more if you read them in order, you don't have to.
Well, let's talk about reader expectation in terms of the genre and the Regency novel. And as you said, Georgette Heyer really was the great pioneer in this, but it is one of the most successful genres, I think, particularly with indie authors, because it's not something that traditional publishers do particularly well. They don't, they can't, as you say, you would want to publish maybe 2, 3, 4 books a year, whereas a publisher, you might only get one a year if you're lucky.
I wish I could write that many books a year. Last year was, 2001, whenever it was, that was a unique.
Right. Okay.
I'll be lucky if I get 2 this year. I only got 1 last year.
But let's talk about what readers expect. What would you say are the essential elements of a Regency novel? What are they? You've got that heroine, you've got doomed romance, you've got the hero. What other elements are readers looking for that you might feel obliged to deliver as an author of Regency fiction?
A lot of people want. They're sort of like billionaire romances set in the past. A lot of them. Yeah, a lot of people just like them when they're dukes.
Right.
So, but you think Regency England had about 1,000 dukes who were all young and wealthy and attractive. So you've only got to look at our current crop. I think there's one who qualifies as that, and then that's the Duke of Westminster. The rest of them, So a lot of them are like lords and ladies and sort of long dresses and carriages and balls and that kind of thing. I'm not all that good at writing those. Some of my books don't have a lord in sight, and they're about common people. Like the last one I published at the time we're recording this was set in Yorkshire, and it was a reasonably well-off farmer and a soldier, and the difficulties they had. There's a lot of tropes you can choose from. Sort of like engaged to the wrong person and friends to lovers and enemies to lovers and all that kind of stuff that you get in contemporary romance. The readers I have, some of them like steamy. I can't write steamy. I hate reading it. It's boring. Mm-hmm. If I find another heroine who shatters into a million pieces at the relevant point, I'll throw the bloody book at the wall. So I write non-steamy, sort of. It fades to black, maybe after they started undressing, but before body parts need to be mentioned. And a lot of my readers like that. A lot of my readers also like the best I can do with historical accuracy. And I bend history now and then, but I usually put a note in the back of the book owning up to when I've done it.
Yes.
And adding up, a few other bits and pieces that readers might be interested in knowing if it was real or that kind of thing. So my readers are sort of sweet. I don't like that term because they don't like pages of sex, basically. There's 1 or 2 bad reviews who I stopped this book because there was bad language in it. But if you don't like the odd bloody or use daft bugger kind of thing, then don't read my stuff. But it's not littered with them. It's only the characters who would say that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes.
It didn't really answer your question. There's a whole wide range of expectations. Some people expect balls and several sex scenes, even though actually to have sex before marriage for the class of people we're talking about was really a no-no in those days. Does that answer it?
It does kind of, yeah. I want to come back to tropes, actually, because every genre has its tropes, and a very common question that we get in the academy as well, because I do weekly surgeries in the academy, is okay, I'm writing in this genre. I know what the tropes are. I want to write about those tropes, and readers are expecting those tropes, but how do I make them my own? How do I take ownership of them? How do you approach those particular tropes that you mentioned there and make them feel fresh?
Well, there's a lot to choose from. So every book only needs 1 or 2. So different combinations, characters from different classes. I mean, if you're doing a sort of cross-class romance, which realistically didn't happen that often, but you can have all sorts of occupations for the lower class of the pair. I like to set things in places that seem real to me. So the first one I wrote was set in the Cotswolds because that's where I lived at the time. Mm-hmm. I've set the King George's Man is set on the North York moors. The actual poem, The Highwaymen, just had a moor. But I've got family that live in Yorkshire, and I've sort of done loads of walking on those moors and things, and it just seemed to fit. So I think giving a proper sense of place can help. And I'm not sure you can always make it fresh, but you do your best just by having characters that give you characters enough depth to feel real.
I always feel that an author's voice is important as well. You know, we could all write or have a go at a kind of a romance novel or a detective novel or whatever, but it's our voice that's unique, that can't be replicated by anyone. Is that, how aware are you of your own voice as a writer when writing in the genre?
Because it's set in the past, I do make an effort not to use words that weren't in use at the time, especially in dialogue, which not all Regency authors manage. There's a bit more we could talk about on that in a minute, actually. There's a non-fiction book I'm working on with a fellow author. I try to make sure it sounds English, which is easy for me, but a lot of American and other non-British authors don't manage.
Yeah.
I've had to use more formal language in writing than I would if I was writing a contemporary novel, or certainly more formal than I use in my own speech, just to kind of give a bit of a feel of sort of Jane Austen. I suppose you could say Jane Austen, not Georgette Hay, was the original, but she didn't introduce villainy in the same way as Georgette Hay did. You know, the odd kidnapping or something can spice things up a bit. And that's, to be honest, that's an attraction of the Regency. It's things like no cell phones, letters could take weeks to get somewhere, journeys took days. There's sort of the great misunderstanding that lots of readers hate, because why didn't they just talk to each other? You can get away with a lot better when it would have taken weeks for the letters to get to and from each other. I think unique voice is, I don't know, it just kind of does it on its own.
Yeah. And you mentioned dialogue and that you were working with someone else on a non-fiction book. What were you hinting at there?
Well, this is an American author, Gail Eastwood, who also writes Regencies, and we've come across each other in Facebook groups. And we did a presentation together for the Regency Fiction Writers group, which is a great one to join, by the way, if any of the other listeners are writing in this genre, about trying to get a Regency voice that sounds Regency. So her contribution was mainly concentrating on things like period-appropriate language, and some of the times when people go too far, like you've heard of 4 and 20 black words.
Yes.
So putting the digit before the 20s or the 30s was reasonably common. But some authors have someone who's 8 and 10 years old. Now, just don't. So my part of it was Americanisms, because Americans, I say Americans, but it can apply to anyone who's not British. Apparently some of them need to be told that there aren't chipmunks in the woods.
No.
And horses can't put their feet in gopher holes, and people don't pass, they die. And they get put in a coffin, not a casket.
Yes.
And stoop only means bend over. It's not a part of a house.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of thing. So they asked us if we wanted to do a full-length course. We decided we'd rather do a book. So it's going to be, it's not an encyclopedia of Regency things. It's a sort of, these things have tripped up a lot of authors. Try not to do it.
Right, fantastic.
So she sort of committed us on Facebook to saying it'd be out in the spring. So I just said spring might be quite late this year.
Okay, we'll keep an eye out for that. And if there's a pre-order link by the time this goes live, we'll put it in the show notes so people can check that out.
I don't think we'll be that far along. Very late spring.
You mentioned that you've published school science textbooks. You've also been a teacher. You also started out as an engineer. Are there particular lessons that you've taken from that stage in your career that you've taken on? Because you've got, listeners, Jane was sending me sort of diagrams of sales and things before the interview. I thought,
I'm a geek.
This is an engineer's mind. This is someone who likes to crunch the numbers. Has that been helpful when it comes to being an indie author?
I think the number crunching helps, sort of looking at sales and things like that, although trying to get my head around why some parts of my Amazon ads work and others don't just does my head in. But, I'm sort of familiar with spreadsheets and things. The publishing experience, I got into that because I'd been a teacher, and I got into teaching because I'd had a non-teaching job that involved technical stuff. So it all kind of links. I think I kind of knew the stages of publishing intimately already, because I was effectively a commissioning editor when I was there, but then I started writing for them. I went freelance. So I'd already been freelancing, writing the school textbooks and occasionally doing some kind of small project management job for them for about 10 years before I dipped my toe into the indie publishing. So the idea of taking on all the different bits and pieces wasn't frightening.
Because creating a textbook is very much a team effort, isn't it? You know, there are different people making contributions. Whereas,
you couldn't do that as an indie. Not the books we did, because they were full scale courses. You know, colour books to use in class and all the worksheets and all the teachers' notes, and so there's a huge amount of photographic permissions and all sorts, and a huge sales team.
Yes,
because unlike what they say about trad publishing for fiction, those publishers do all the marketing and selling. So we effectively, if you write for them, because I did a lot of writing for it as well as the publishing, you're writing to order. You know, you have a set format because it's a team of authors. They make their money when the new curriculum comes out, which they don't seem to have stopped doing recently. I think they might have had a few other things on their minds recently.
Can't imagine what.
No, but you want the new textbooks to be available as soon as possible when the new curriculum has to be taught. So it's always a huge team effort. But I'm a bit of an introvert and a loner, so it's quite nice not to have a huge team effort as well. It's ready when it's ready. My copy editor is actually my sister, who does it professionally. But we do have that sort of means that I'm fine with quite a lot of back and forth about, I've just got King George's Man back from her for the second time. So there might be one or two bits I'll just send back and say, I've changed all this again. Does it read okay now? Because sometimes you just don't see things yourself.
Yeah. There is. I'm delighted to hear that you are an introverted author, and listeners, we ask people to fill out a form and send their author photo, and yours, I think, is the first author photo where they've covered their face up with a book, which I think is brilliant.
Partly because I was too mean to get a professional mugshot done, but that was me. That was me sitting in my garden,
good,
with a book and a huge mug of tea, just like this.
Brilliant. Now, I think there will be lots of authors, because especially if you're an indie author, there might be some pressure. I've got to sell myself. I've got to do this and go on podcasts and all this kind of stuff. But you've made a success of things without really putting your mug, as in face, front and center, as say I do, and other authors do. And that must be very reassuring for a lot of listeners, is that they don't have to necessarily sell themselves. You're selling the books and the genre, aren't you? And
I have sold me a little bit, because I have a Facebook page that I don't really push, but some of my fans look on it, and I sort of post holiday pics and picture of me cycling and things like that on it. And I also put some pics like that in my newsletter. So there's about 3,500 people out there that get the odd photo of my holiday, whether they like it or not. So I do put some personal stuff in there, but you don't have to have a face.
Yes. Yeah. Well, what I love as well is so much of it, because I was looking at your website and the blog, and you're regularly visiting historical buildings and you've got a lovely word cloud, and the biggest word on the word cloud is garden, which I thought was lovely.
Well, that's partly because my partner really got into gardening in the last sort of 10 years. So we actually go to visit the gardens.
Right.
He's not that interested in going around the house quite often, but I can leave him wandering around the grounds and do the tour myself. Yeah.
But it's all very on message, on theme, on genre, without having to necessarily put yourself front and center, which I think will be reassuring to a lot of people. The other thing I want to talk about, which is really interesting, and I think is something a lot of us are going to be dealing with in the near future. You recently did an audiobook of Saving Meg, and you used an AI, an artificial intelligence narrator, and it says on there, digitally narrated using the voice of William Birch. So tell us about that as an experiment, and how that came about and what you've learned from it.
Well, the reason I experimented was I was approached by Tantor, who do audiobooks, and they did my first book, The Mrs. McKinnons, and actually the first in the series as well, Source for the Gander. And I get some income from that, but to be honest, I haven't really bothered tracking it because it's not a lot. I don't think I've earned my advance yet, and that's quite a few years ago. I got all enthusiastic and paid a human to narrate one of my other books. And again, that I don't think I've earned back yet what I paid for it. But to be fair, I haven't been pushing the marketing on that, and I'm not really sure how to do it because I publish it through Findaway Voices. It's harder to push it on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. So
I thought I'd see, I think Joanna Penn had an episode about AI. She's very keen on all things technological.
Yes. She's,
And I think she's had some of her non-fiction books narrated, and I think it would work quite well for that. So I decided to try an experiment because this company was relatively cheap, and I picked Saving Meg's because there's only 18,000 words. It was the shortest book.
Right.
They give you a sample chapter of the voice before you have to pay the full whack. And I asked my beta reading team if any of them listened, and if they did, would they listen and say what they thought? Some of them said it was fine. Some of them said horrible. But enough said it was fine, so I thought I'd try it. And I wouldn't do it again until it's improved a lot, because they gave you a round of edits, but the AI voice got the emphasis in sentences in quite different places to where a human would have done it.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it completely changed the meaning, or gave the wrong impression. And so I couldn't face going through all of it again. So I paid my sister to do it. So I paid for editing on it as well.
Right.
And I've put it up on my website for the free. People can listen to the first chapter free and then buy it for a couple of quid if they want to read the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Or they could just get the ebook on Kindle Unlimited. It's probably easier.
Well, I'll put a link because I had a listen and I thought it was absolutely fascinating, because I think if you hadn't told me it was an AI voice, I think I would have. It's almost there, isn't it? It's.
Yeah.
I mean, and these things are only going to get better as well. And as you say, there's a strange emphasis on certain words, and it is sometimes it's a little bit sat nav. You know, you get the rising intonation on some of the wrong words or what have you. But it's almost there, and I think these things are only going to get better. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops over the next few years. You might not know the answer to this as well. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, the but is I haven't listened to any of the other audiobooks all the way through. The one I had done myself, I did for proofing, but again, I farmed it out to my sister. So I listened to the first part of the Mrs. McKinnon's, and and the narrator does the voices, not very different voices, but enough different so you can tell who's who. And she gave one of the Mrs. McKinnon's a Scottish accent. And to be honest, in spite of the surname, because the women had the surname because of who they'd married, it hadn't occurred to me that this character would be Scottish.
Yeah.
But it sounded, well, of course. So that narrator, amongst many other things, has brought more depth to that book.
Yeah.
All the people sound the same from the AI.
Yeah.
The women don't sound any different. Now, you don't want some bloke to put on a squeaky voice.
No.
But a real human can bring a lot more to it than that AI could. So I wouldn't actually say, if you enjoy listening for the sort of immersive, lost in the story, as opposed to listening while you're doing the ironing, I think the AI is still quite a way off.
Yeah, yeah. And it used the voice of William Birch, and you may not know the answer to this, but does William Birch get a cut? I presume they've scooped up his voice digitally, scraped it, and used it and use it to sort of remix and make your audiobook. Do you know if he gets any money for that?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
You'd hope he must have some kind of money, because
must have a deal.
I mean, some people think they shouldn't really have to pay much for. Why would you pay for a Kindle book? It doesn't cost them anything. It costs all my time.
Yeah, exactly.
And why should the publishing company get all the money, not me?
Yeah,
have a cut. Yeah, so it's the same argument. I don't know what's going to happen to that. But at the moment, I'm still on the side of, if you want to listen to an audiobook, it'll be much nicer with a human.
Yes. I for one, welcome our robot overlords. What's coming next, Jayne? So we've got King George's Man. You've got this book with the non-fiction book coming with Gail Eastwood. What else is on the horizon?
I've got a book that I've got in first draft and I put away because it could have been the first in the series. Mm-hmm. I've got some ideas for books 2 and 3, but they haven't gelled yet, so I'm just going to get it out there. It's another, in this case, book 1 will be standalone. I don't do cliffhanger endings. I hate that. Yeah. Books 2 and 3 will probably need to be read in order, but they're far distant horizon. So, you know the business about having them meet cute in the first few pages?
Yes.
This pair don't physically meet till halfway through the book, so that's it. So it has a title, An Improper Correspondence.
Nice.
Book 2 has a title and a vague plot, and that's A Dubious Paternity. And the third one might be called A Grand Spectacle. So excellent. I've even got titles that sound similar, unlike my other series. It needs a bit of reworking to get a better plot. Like, I have a great tendency to not give my characters enough agency on the first draft through.
Right, okay.
But I'm hoping to get that out second half of this year sometime.
Brilliant.
And then I might concentrate on adding another book into the middle of the Milestone series. See how it goes. It really goes to plan.
Yeah, so you're a lot prolific than you thought than you said earlier. This could be another bumper year. So, Jayne, thanks so much for speaking to us. This has been absolutely fascinating. And
it's been a pleasure.
Hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Mark.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Oh, Mark, when Jayne talked about that experience she had as a child, going to this home in Malta, that she stayed at this house, and she discovered these books that she'd never seen before. It made me think, how many stories are there out in the world? Probably everyone listening to us right now, where you can all go back to that very first discovery of maybe a series of books. It might have not been the first book, but a series of books that kind of, it was almost like your ticket, your gateway into the world of the fantastical, and it just brought so much nostalgia for me when I think back to my writing days. Was there a book for you or a series for you that, or an event happened in your life?
Oh, yes. It was the first time we ever went to Spain. Okay. And I was, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12 years old. And we went to Spain, and there was typically in Spain, there was an English shop, and they had at the back. Calf. Exactly.
Doing the English breakfasts.
Exactly. Yeah. But at the back, there were all these secondhand books. And you still see these in Spain now, where English people out there, they take a book on holiday and leave it behind. Yeah. And, like I say, I was 11, might even been younger, might have been 10. But I remember picking up a copy of The Omen by David Seltzer, which is which weirdly it's a tie-in novelization, because he wrote the script, but he wrote the book so quickly it came out before the film, I think. So people think the film was based on the book, but it's actually a tie-in novelization. And I remember I think it was my first proper grown-up horror, and it blew my tiny little mind and, put me on the path to Stephen King and stuff like that. Yeah. So, and of course it has, if you know The Omen, it has all these prophecies from the Bible and stuff like that. And I'm reading it and thinking, oh, this is all real. It's all in the Bible. It's not, he made it up. I'm thinking, oh, this is all real. Oh. This is, but yeah, so it was, so I've got lots of happy memories of, because just going into little secondhand places like that, because you never know what you're going to find. And I'm always conscious that if I go away somewhere and there is one of these bookshelves, and I like to leave something behind as well. Just up the road here, we've got a village library in an old red telephone box. It's been converted, and I get sent stuff, because basically, because I book. I'm a talent booker for the podcast now because I book the authors. Publicists will send me proof copies, and I can't read them all, and I can't store them all, so they all end up going up the library. So if you live near me in sort of North Kent, and you're wondering why there are hardback first editions of really big name authors in there, it's because of me.
There's going to be queues. There's going to be people loitering around that telephone box now.
Start getting requests. Yeah,
totally. You can set your own telephone box up.
It's like a pay it forward thing, It's like
it is. I love it. No, I love it, and I think we have a couple of those locally as well. And I think it's such a wonderful community thing to have. But yeah, I had that. I think there's different moments, aren't there, in childhood? So there's the first scary book you read, or the first adult book you read. That's always a big moment for me. It was, weirdly enough, it was a Stephen King novel. It was Cujo, which freaked me out, and I read words I didn't even know what they meant at the time, and there was no internet to look them up. But I think as a kid as well, for me, it was those books, those fantastical kind of kids' adventure books. I mean, I think Enid Blyton will be on a lot of people's list. The famous five, the Secret Seven. My kids loved the Secrets. Right. Was it Secret Seven books?
Secret Seven, yeah.
And the Mountain, and this, and the ship, and but I think it's really important for everyone to stop and just think about, like, what was that series or that book or that author for you as a child that kind of blew your world apart and probably started your journey of love of reading, which then led to love or interest in writing. And it's so important as well when you think about kids growing up today. It's like, how can we help them get into those types of books? I know a lot of parents sit and do bedtime reading stories, but what they're doing is they're pulling out the books that they want to reread from their childhood. And I think that's an amazing gift, because it introduces books to kids that they otherwise might never come across in their scholastics, book club that they get at school.
It's the things that you discover yourself when it becomes your thing.
Yes.
And it's the thing that maybe it's the thing that the teachers and the parents don't approve of. That might just be me. But, there were books that I thought, oh, yeah, this is a grown-up book. This is something that, because I read the Jaws, Peter Benchley's Jaws book as well. Again, about 10 years old. Lots of exciting new words in that as well.
Yeah.
So it's reading those things that you discover for yourself that might have just been left on a shelf somewhere, that might have it was little things like my uncle used to read those little war comics as well, that those little sort of A5 war comics that he would leave those lying about, and again there was something a bit grown up about them. That I'm probably not supposed to be reading this, but I did anyway.
In a way, it's a window into the adult world, isn't it? For a child to be able to kind of like, it's almost one of the most important steps we take into teenagedom or adulthood. It's our safe way of, not having to speak to a scary adult, but it's a safe way of kind of having a little peek into that world and feeling like you almost shouldn't be there, but wanting to get more and more of it. Yeah. But I have to lament, Mark, because I was speaking yesterday with someone about the irony, the biggest challenge that parents faced back in, say, when we were kids, like back in the 70s and 80s, was catching kids reading under the covers with a torch. And I was lamenting. I said, I would pay money to catch my child reading under the covers with a torch, because nowadays the light is shining the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Now they're looking at the dark web.
Right. And it's like, I wish the light would face the other way onto words in a musty old paper book, then lighting up their face with TikTok videos and all God knows what else. But the thing is that it's funny, isn't it? Because that was the thing our parents used to like, put that torch away. Where did you get that torch from? Did you take that from your father's drawer? Like,
well, I saw a cartoon online, and it was from about 100 years ago, and it showed people on a train looking at paperback books, and it said, "Oh, it's killed the art of conversation." So people thought the books were the things that were going to kill, Right? So it's I don't know. What goes around comes around.
It does. It does.
Yeah. I read more kids are reading than ever. Literacy's through the roof. People are reading. It's just we're cramming our minds with all sorts of other crap as well.
Other stuff as well. Yeah. But, and there's a lot of good reading going on online as well. I don't want to dismiss that. But
Yeah. Nothing
beats a good old paper book, honestly. Let's talk though about writing like insane numbers of books. There was a moment in the interview with Jayne where you talked about the number of books she'd written, and these are like, to quote her, she said, "It's book number 11. I think." Yes. I just thought, what a brilliant problem to have. Like, you've written so many books that you've kind of lost count. You're doing well when you can't remember how many books you've written.
Yes, and no, it's and she said publishing more books is an excellent way of marketing, and I think she's absolutely right. If you keep getting books out there, if someone picks up one, then there's a good chance they'll want to read the other 10 or 12 or however many it is that you've written, and particularly if you're an indie author as well. But we talk about milestones, that thing of, when you get to our age, you sometimes forget your age. So I think it's the same thing.
I think if you've got more books than you have numbers in your phone number, that's where it all starts, I reckon, because it's hard enough remembering a phone number most of the time. But I love the fact that, and we should celebrate this, that again, another joy that we have as readers is we find a new author and we read their book and we love their book, and then we go online to see what else they've got. And that moment where, oh my gosh, they've got like 10 other books. It's like this, it's like you've just discovered this treasure trove that you never knew existed. And again, that's the kind of joy that authors like Jayne bring a reader when they've got that back catalogue. Yeah. Another reason, folks, to just push through, like finish those books, get those books done, get them out there. Because you give people that huge sense of joy when they discover there's tons more they can feast on. But then you get the problem once they've actually like read your back catalogue in like a week. They're like knocking on doors saying, "Oi, when's the next one?" I know. Then you get the pressure. But then again, that's what you want. I mean, that's a great problem to have. Fans demanding more of your work helps you kind of get down to write.
There's nothing like the day after publication for people going, "When's the next one? You spent a year working on this thing." Yeah, great. When's the? Read it again.
There must be a way. How can we slow readers down? Like, it's just like it's ridiculous. They can literally polish a book off. What other industry or profession is there where it takes like maybe 12 months to create something which someone can consume in a tiny amount of time? Is there anything else?
Well, it's all the creative industries, isn't it? Music's the same.
But music's different because you do listen. Music, you listen to the track, like you love a track. Death Cab for Cutie's new album. Absolutely unbelievable. I've been listening to it all week, but I've consumed it and I'm keeping on streaming it. And of course they're benefiting from that. But books is different, isn't it? I'm a one book kind of guy. If I read a book once, I know, the ultimate dilemma of the book reader. Are you I read a book once, I love it so much, I just keep reading it till the covers fall off? Or are you the kind of person who's, I've read the book once, that was amazing, and I bet you there's something else which is just as amazing and I want to read that? I'm the latter. I always want to try something new.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a teen and in my early 20s, I would read the same books again and again. But that was where I was reading a book every day or every couple of days. And I just can't keep that up now. What I tend to do now is I buy new editions of a book that I've read many times with no intention of reading it whatsoever. So I get a lovely slipcased edition of something. I said, that is going to go on the shelf. I'm never going to crack its spine open. Idiot. So
I know that. I got the whole Calvin and Hobbes collection. Someone pulled it off the shelf and I was like, no, don't touch it. Don't touch it. That was like $150. Don't touch it. And then I actually reflect on it thinking, how daft am I? Like, what's the point of having, I mean, you're not buying it for the spine. I mean, let's be honest. That's what you're paying, like, what, $40 for the spine and a pair of white gloves.
Guilty
I think
as charged.
It's funny, isn't it? We're funny human beings. Bring on AI. That's what No, I'm only joking. But actually, segue. Let's talk about this AI narrator. I knew that you could do this. I saw David Guetta apparently write some lyrics with an AI generated lyric writer, and then went to another generator and got an Eminem emulated voice to sing it. And then he played it in front of like 30,000 people just to see if they reacted, and they all went mental thinking Eminem was on his track. So I've heard about this emulation of AI and apparently we can do it with our own voices. Have you heard about this, Mark?
Yeah, well, and it's things like I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I heard that James L. Jones basically gave Disney and Lucasfilm his voice so that Darth Vader, even when James L. Jones is, getting on a bit now, even if he's no longer with us or doesn't have that kind of voice, it's there, filed away to be used, and likewise with Mark Hamill's image, and it's it's. I mean, again, let's not go down a rabbit hole on this, but we are going to do a special episode on this, folks, because it's personally, I'm excited, but I know a lot of authors are worried about it, thinking it's going to put us out of business. And this is a week where, in the news, we've seen that Clark's World had to shut down submissions for short stories because people were submitting AI-generated stories. On KDP has been, as I predicted, by the way, has been deluged with AI-generated novels which aren't very good. It will get better, but I'm not worried because there's also great opportunities as well. It's terrific for generating blurbs and titles and copy for ads and stuff like that. It's
or even
really,
just
really
ideas.
good.
Like if you're stuck plotting, you can ask ChatGPT for some ideas around what happens next. I mean, again, I've been having debates with a lot of people about this, and I'm a tech head. I grew up in the internet. Like I'm solely responsible for all the bad stuff on the internet. I mean, I was in the mid 90s. I literally, and I say that jokingly, but like we did things like the very first e-commerce site launch ever. I was in charge of Princess Diana's Memorial Fund in I think it was 95 or 96, something like that. The Comic Relief website, when they first took e-commerce payments, we ran the budget website when the government, we had to like somehow make sure that the website didn't fall over. We'd go into 10 Downing Street and set up their servers. That's what I did in the mid 90s. Went to the governments in the East, all over the world, like setting up it was bonkers. And back then I had no idea what would be built on top of this. I mean, and AI is very much possible because of the internet. And even for me, as someone who was right at the forefront of all this technology, talking about streaming media in 1997, I went to Liverpool Football Club and tried to convince them that they should start putting their football games online. And they laughed at me and said, credit cards, size screens, who's going to watch that? And I went, well, I think it might take off as YouTube. and yet, even everything I've done in the internet world, technology, the companies I've set up, the websites I've run, I can't get my head around just how ridiculously huge this could be. And even Bill Gates came out yesterday and he said, this is this is one of the biggest technological advancements. It is.
It's going to change a lot, and it's going to change the way people work. People are going to lose jobs. People are going to get new jobs because of it. It's going to change absolutely everything. Yeah.
It's going to. Everyone's worried about the loss of things, and that's where we feel the threat. But I'm thinking, what will it create as well? Yeah. But again, I'm on the fence. I'm not going to right now. I'm not going to say I think it's amazing. I think it's really potentially dangerous. I think it's both. But one of my friends who's in his 50s said to me, you know what, Mark? He said this week, and this is wise words. He said, in a way, I'm quite glad I'm getting on, so I don't have to like worry about this for but I do think about our kids and the generations that follow us. I've got some stories to tell, but let's leave that for another episode because there's just so much that we could cover. But would you do that, Mark? Would you take an AI narrator of either your own voice or pick off the shelf, maybe Julie Walters, you've had her before, but if you could pick, who would it be actually out of interest? Who would you get if you could pick any voice to narrate your next book?
Well, I mean, I've got to tip my hat to Candida Gubbins, who does my books anyway, because she's an amazing narrator. Of course. Yeah. But, I don't know. Actually, James L. Jones is a good one. Yeah. You have. I mean, when I told my wife that there was a box that could replace me and do everything that I could do only quicker, she asked where she could get one. Hey, put them tish.
Right. talk about being made redundant. Yeah, every husband in the world. But can I do the dishes? That's what I want to know. Can I do the dishes?
We should. I'm going to put some text up on my blog, because we did ask ChatGPT to put together an episode of the bestseller experiment. It's too long to recite here, but it was uncannily spot on, wasn't it?
It was absolutely hilarious. I mean, that was one of the first things, when I saw that, I thought, oh, wow, this is like, partly because I think, well, bestseller experiment, we've got like 1 million downloads. It's a big writing podcast, but in the big scheme of things, it's not like, it's not like kind of like, Fox News kind of level of listeners each week or viewers. So I was blown away, but I don't know how it got the information, maybe from the transcripts on the episodes that we've got online. Yeah. But it was bonkers, wasn't it? Although interesting enough, it had the transcript broken down, didn't it? It had names of people speaking, and we had, who was the guest? Jayne Smith?
Jayne Smith.
Jayne Smith, the multi-million selling. Okay, folks, if you want to have a laugh, is it going to be linked in the show notes, Mark? Did you say?
Yeah, I'll pop a link in the show notes. So
you've got to go and look at this. It's absolutely hilarious. The thing that was kind of interesting, though, is that one of us was called Mark and the other one was called Marcus.
With a K.
With a K. Which, weirdly enough, and I'm sure this isn't related, was my nickname in primary school.
Well, I get called Marcus a lot as well.
Yeah. So I think AI did it, possibly just to differentiate, because it thought, well, it can't have Mark and Mark. Yeah. So whether it was clever enough to just change one of our names slightly, but it could have had Mark. If it had Mark 1 and Mark 2, I would have freaked completely. Yeah. Maybe that's the new version. But no, do go check it out, folks, because it is absolutely, it's quite a short transcript, which proves it's not real, because me and Mark talk for far more than 3 minutes or whatever it was.
It's the one thing it got really wrong.
Absolutely. Now, folks, if you'd like to join us for the extended episode, we've got so much more to cover in Jayne's interview. I want to ask Mark what a companion story is. I've heard of it. I think I know what it is. But if you don't know what that is as well, join us. I'm going to ask some dumb questions. Also, we're going to talk about reader expectation and something called fan service, which again is new to me. So if you're interested in what that is, we're going to talk about it in the extended version. And also, we're going to discuss whether pacing is easier today. The pacing of a story is easier today with communications and technology. And in reverse, is it much harder to write a novel where you're waiting 3 weeks for a letter to be delivered? Not exactly going down in the Bourne Ultimatum as a movie, that would, in some ways. And the other thing that we want to talk about is it necessary to have to put yourself as an author front and center? Or like Jayne, can you build a career without having to be out there? Because we know that that's a big challenge for many, many authors. So if you'd like to join us, please pop along. And guess what, folks? You'll support the podcast in doing this. Pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and support the podcast and get access to the extended. So, Mark, what's going on in social media this week?
Wonderful stuff. Well, let's start with the big news. And this is so wonderful. Sarah Moorhead, who's been on the podcast before. We did a special episode with Stuart Turton. You remember she taught Stuart, and he's become a bestseller.
Episode.
And she had Witness X, which was this amazing book. She's got some terrific news. She signed a 2-book deal with Canelo, forgive me. And the first one is called The Treatment, which is publishing in August. It's a high-octane, spine-shivering, speculative thriller. It involves neuropsychology, crime, ethics, and justice. Really, really excited for Sarah. Another long-time supporter of the podcast. She's in the BXP group as well. And I've booked her for the podcast. We're going to be talking about her book when it comes out. So her story is a fascinating one, because she had this thing where it was, first book, big splash, and then she was out of contract, and she was kind of thinking, is this it? But she's back, and it's going to be a big inspirational story. So that's just terrific. So big
I was so delighted, to see
Yeah.
Sarah's success in that, and she's definitely in my top 12 Scousers. Absolutely brilliant, and wonderful news. And that, just talking about that interview that we did with her and Stuart, that was one of my favourite interviews. So if you've missed that one, you've got to go.
I'll put a link in the show notes.
Say no more. It was brilliant. Yeah.
Steve Gowland in the BXP group, he's got a cover reveal. His new book, Delusions and Dragons, is out in May. And it's just terrific. Really, really, I get a kind of Romancing the Stone meets fantasy thing here. Now, Steve Gowland is one of our 200 words a day. Every single day, he's out there putting those words down, logging them online. And he's, again, someone who's, we talked about the more books you write, it's like they start marketing themselves kind of thing. Yeah. Steve's getting a great library of fantasy novels together. It's just terrific. So
prolific,
again,
I think we have to call Mr. Steve now. I mean, that is just, it seems like it feels like every other episode we're talking about a new cover of Steve's book. It's brilliant. I love it.
And do you remember we were talking about streaking and nudity a couple of episodes ago? You might remember. Right, okay.
I do remember that. Where's this going? Go on.
Well, Gavin G. Smith, another friend of the podcast, amazing author as well. He just tweeted us, and this is in all caps. He's put, "Right, drunk and naked." I said, whatever makes you happy, Gavin, as long as you get those 200 words down. He said, it makes edits more fun. Do an edit. Take a shot. And he said, autocorrect, tried to turn the word shot into something else, but we won't go into that. So, it's working for Gavin, people.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Can I make just one suggestion? Not in the coffee shop.
No. Not again. Not after last time.
No, because, absolutely brilliant. Drunk and naked and writing. Yeah, brilliant. Well, as we said, we knew there would be somebody out there that would be doing it.
We knew it would be Gavin.
Whatever it takes, folks. That's what I say. Whatever it takes. Get those folks, words down.
If you want to get in touch, find us online. We're at bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact tab there. You can drop us a line there. On social media, on Facebook, we're Bestseller Experiment, and Twitter and Instagram, we are at BestsellerXP. And give us a rating wherever you download your podcast. Subscribe, give us a rating, give us a review. All of these things make all the difference to visibility and getting the word out there.
Brilliant. And if you'd like to watch this episode on YouTube as well, you can get many of our episodes on YouTube as well. Watch me and Mark chat away, seeing us in all our I wouldn't say glory, Mark, that might be pushing it a bit too much, but if you would like to also get the writing habit of a lifetime, folks, don't forget 200wordchallenge.com is the website to go to sign up to try our 7-day challenge. Can you write 7 days, 200 words minimum? It will change your life. It will change your life if you get into it. Absolutely fantastic. And for anyone else interested in joining the Academy, becoming a member of this incredibly friendly, inspiring, and wonderfully supportive community with Mark and I as your coaches, please pop along to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. So, Mr. Stay, have a fantastic week.
You too, sir.
And I look forward to chatting with you again next week. And it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.